Hello, this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. Welcome back to my Portland, Oregon permaculture garden here in Zone 8B. Today's video is going to be a little different than my typical video. I am asking for your help and your expertise. If you have watched any of my videos where I talk about intentional community, ecovillages, co-housing, you'll know that that is something that is very, very interesting to me. That is a huge draw. I am fascinated with the idea of experimenting with sustainable living, particularly sustainable living in the city, and what that would look like when we do it in community with other people. So over the past few years, I've been looking at what it would take to start an eco-village in Portland. Now, we already have multiple eco-villages here within the Portland metro area, but all of them are full and some of them have long wait lists. There are different models. There's the condominium model, there are rental models, there is Try on Life, which is a nonprofit in a wildlife sanctuary. There are smaller models that basically work where a group of friends get together and either buy a house with some property and then put some tiny houses on it, or share a large house, or they buy a string of houses in a row, maybe 3 or 4 properties across the street from each other in a little cluster, and then rent out rooms in their houses and share the yards and create a smaller experiment in eco-village living. I looked at what it would take and found that basically to start one of these larger condominium models or the rental model like the recent Kailash Ecovillage tour I did, it takes millions and millions of dollars. The cost of property in the Portland area is very high, and I am not interested in leaving my city, and I really am not interested in leaving my property. I really love my home. I love where we're at. So after being initially really discouraged, after speaking with developers and founders of other eco-villages and residents, past and current, was really discouraged to feel like the only way to start a new eco-village is to have generational wealth or win the lottery or have a windfall of some sort. I was even more frustrated after looking at the number of co-housing and eco-villages that have tried to get off the ground and failed, and folks have lost a lot of money in those. Obviously, we are 6 people on a really limited income, and so for us, I don't have venture capital to be making big, risky moves. It felt to me like the only way to craft and design an experiment in urban sustainable living in the Portland area is to be rich. And that's not sustainable. So if we want to build resilient communities, have experiments in resilient communities, we're reliant on probably older, affluent, white Americans to start those communities. And I've looked at a few recent co-housing starts that are attempting to get going, and I have noticed the demographic of folks who are launching these projects is white people in their 50s or early 60s, because that's who has money. That's who has money and who has the time to dedicate to these things. And then I think, what will your project be like in 10 years when you're all in your late 60s, early 70s, late 70s, and no longer able to care for the property like you once could? What does that mean for the future of those communities? I want to build something truly sustainable. I want to build something that is affordable and accessible to people. One of the things I loved about the Kailash Ecovillage tour was that because it's a rental model, folks don't have to have $600,000-$700,000 to buy a condo unit in an eco-village situation. They can rent. Folks who aren't ready to buy, aren't financially able, or just not in a place in their life where they want to buy, can participate in eco-village life. And because the owner at Kailash had done such a wonderful and intentional job of taking his tremendous financial resources and creating a community where he could charge below market rent, it's affordable to a broad range of folks who couldn't otherwise do it. So after I toured Kailash, to me, that really sparked something. How can I be true to my values and want to create an eco-village community where it's accessible not only to folks with a very high level of income, but to anybody who really wants to work at building intentional, sustainable community in the city? Particularly folks of modest income, because that's probably, let's be real, who needs an eco-village life the most, and who has the least access to land in the city. So I was thinking about how could this work? How could this work? We are on a limited income. I don't have the tremendous resources it would take to buy an apartment complex or to buy up all the houses on a street. How do I do this? So this is where I'm at right now. I brazenly talked to the neighbors next door who have a beautiful half-acre property with a large house and have talked repeatedly about how they would potentially like to move to the country in the coming years. And I said, if you ever want to sell your house, before you list it on the market, come talk to me because I want to buy it. I would love to think about what it would be like to take Parker's Permaculture, a 1/4 acre property, take down the fence between myself and my lovely next door neighbors should they ever move. I don't want to imply that like I want them to go away because they're really nice folks. But if I were to have access to that property, if I could take down the fence and have another 1/2 acre and a large house with the potential to rent out at least 4 rooms in a shared co-housing situation, maybe park a tiny home or 2 on the property. I think technically Portland lets you have 1 tiny house per property, but we're out in East Portland. I don't know that people are going to check on us. And what would that look like? Could I add a couple of dairy goats? Could I expand the way the orchard is done? Could I increase efficiency in this part of the yard and over there? Give folks access to beekeeping, duck keeping, chicken keeping, potentially dairy goat keeping, orcharding, extensive organic gardens, and experiment with things like reducing our carbon footprint, reducing our use of city water and sewer, working on composting projects, working on living in a way that is attempting to figure out what is the most realistic and sustainable way to live in the city in community. To me, when I see groups like Blueberry Co-housing in the Cully neighborhood, it seems like those smaller experiments are more approachable and potentially more successful. So Blueberry is like a group of 4 friends, I think, who bought 3 houses in a row and 1 across the street. I'll link to their information below. And then they rent out rooms in their houses. So they have a community of, 10 or 12 or 14 people at any given time, and they share their yards and share their resources, have community dinners. So I feel like what I'm asking for here, what my dream is, my big reach ask, is that in some unknown period of time, when my lovely neighbors next door decide to move to the country, 2 to 4 years, they said, that they would offer me the first right to buy, and I could buy that property, which is currently worth over $600,000, which is a fortune. Tear down the fence, build a wonderful, sustainable, garden-based, maybe even market garden-based property. Rent the house to a number of individuals who have the same shared goals and want to experiment with me, but somehow be able to afford to do it below market rate like Kailash does, so that it is something that isn't just accessible to people who can afford the insane rent in Portland, Oregon. There would be my next door neighbor, Ben, on this side, Parker's Permaculture, and the property next door. All a little eco-village experiment. That's my dream. I'm sure if I bought goats, Ben would be over in my yard all day long. How do I make that happen? This is my question for you all. How do I go about fundraising? I've looked at what it would take to form a nonprofit, to save up for something like this, and all of the strings that are attached do not appeal to me at all. So form an LLC. How does one fundraise? How do you find an angel investor? How do you find a large sum of capital to launch a project? And not only acquiring the property, but then making the necessary improvements to the property, like rainwater capture, like solar panels. How do you do all of that without generational wealth and without taking out a huge loan? So something I've learned is that because this property is next door to mine, I cannot get a second mortgage on it. I can't call the house next door to mine a vacation property. So I'd have to get what's called an investor mortgage, which would require me to put down about $120,000 in cash and then get a higher interest rate. A higher interest rate on a mortgage would then mean I could not charge below market rate, because then I would lose money every month. I couldn't pay the bills. So that's not sustainable. So to me, it feels like after crunching the numbers 8 different ways, the only sustainable reality is for me to have a windfall, me to get an angel investor, me to win the lottery, me to figure out how do I fundraise that kind of money. If you have thoughts and advice, I would love to hear it in the comments. If you work in urban sustainability, if you work for groups that do grant writing for folks who want to experiment in affordable living, in increasing green space in the city, in preserving green space in the city, in preserving urban agriculture. Please leave a comment for me, or please email me at parkerspermaculture@gmail.com. It may take me a bit to get back to you, but I would love your contact info. If you work with a nonprofit who partners with businesses to do grant writing, sponsors businesses in their projects, I would love to hear from you. Just trying to figure out, how could I make a dream into a reality? How could I create an opportunity to share so much of what our family has here with other individuals, with other families that otherwise couldn't afford it and would be interested in having community with our family, with other folks in the neighborhood, where we could not only experiment here in ways that perhaps graduate students would want to study, maybe Portland State or Oregon State would want to study and be able to get valuable research out of, but also how we could connect with the Parkrose neighborhood, how we could offer on that kind of a spacious property to have community events, community potlucks, community weekly bread firings, where we would have the bread oven up and people could come over and we could hang out and bake bread, where we could do garden tours, where we could do potentially free workshops for folks on urban sustainability. Those are all the ways that my idealistic dreamer brain is going. But also, let me just say, Parkrose Permaculture was a dream that I had. And I made it a reality, right? I found out a way to do it. It's something I had longed for since I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I made it happen. So just because something feels really difficult and it feels like a really big dream, it doesn't mean that it can't be done. And I also realized I don't have all the skills and tools in order to figure out the path to get there at this point in time. I don't know the next steps to take. So I'm asking for your help and advice. What would you do if you were me and had the potential in a few years to buy a large plot of land next door, large for the city, half acre, and you wanted to create a small eco-village where you could study, you could experiment in sustainable living, collect data about sustainable living, try to figure out ways to reproduce affordable, minimally impactful ways to live in urban and suburban spaces? What would you do if you were me? What would your next step be? So thank you for your input. Thanks in advance. Appreciate you guys watching. I'm just going to keep daydreaming and keep collecting information as I try to figure out, where could I go from here? Thank you for watching. Please check out the description below, including looking at some of the links to other sustainable living communities in the Portland metro area. There's a lot of cool folks doing a lot of cool experiments, and I feel like we need more of those. We need more data points. We need more folks trying new things. So this is the new thing that I want to try. I just don't know how to get there yet. I'll be back really soon. Thanks.